I didn't love Oscar. I didn't care about his illegitimate daughter. I allowed him to have a female confidant. Whenever he called me, I always pretended the signal was bad. I would say 2 sentences and then hang up. Even when he transferred me a lot of money, I couldn't be bothered to humor him. After another argument, he looked at me with reddened eyes and asked, "You stopped loving me a long time ago, didn't you?" I laughed until tears came out. When he was entangled with his canary, when he got back together with his old flame, when he mocked me for being a cheap thing from the slums, he should have known. The 2 of us were bound to end up here sooner or later. Chapter 1. A male friend I hadn't seen in years came back to the country on short notice, so I specially arranged a welcome dinner for him. We had only exchanged a couple of pleasantries when the ringtone sounded. I glanced at the phone lying on the table. It was Oscar calling. I had no intention of answering. My friend had obviously seen the name and laughed. "That doesn't seem like your style. In the past, let alone a phone call, even if Oscar sent you a single message, you'd be dying to reply right away." I laughed along with him. "You said it yourself, that was in the past." When the phone rang for the 3rd time, I pressed the answer button. Oscar's voice came from the other end. "Celine, where are you? I prepared a birthday gift for you." I answered with something completely unrelated. "That photo that's been all over the papers lately came out pretty well. That young lady's figure keeps getting better and better. The 2 of you look quite well matched standing together." I had no mind to keep listening to whatever Oscar was saying on the other end. "The signal's bad. Let's talk later." As I said that, I hung up immediately. A new text message appeared on my phone, notifying me that an astronomical sum had been deposited into my bank account. I raised an eyebrow and carefully counted the zeros at the end. It was transferred by Oscar. I didn't ask him why, nor did I put on airs and send it back. No reason not to take free money. Chapter 2. By the time I finished eating, it was already 4 in the afternoon, and the car drove smoothly through the gates of the villa. I leaned back against the seat and glanced out the window. Several paparazzi were squatting outside the entrance of the old residence. The moment they saw my car, they immediately raised their cameras, and the clicking of shutters burst out in rapid succession. I withdrew my gaze, too lazy to spare them another look. I had long since gotten used to scenes like this. Ever since the day I married Oscar, I had been living under the spotlight. At first, outsiders looked at me with curiosity and contempt, waiting to see how I, a sparrow that had flown onto a high branch, would make a fool of myself. And yet, Oscar and I lived together steadily year after year, and we even made it past the 7-year itch. The whole city of Hong Kong was stunned, and people began sighing that we really were true love. Later, news of our marital breakdown came out. The outside world began a new round of scrutiny into my relationship with Oscar. When I entered the living room, the beautician I had booked was already there with her team waiting. I closed my eyes and enjoyed their professional touch. Aromatherapy, massage, facial treatment. After the full routine, my skin really did look much better. From the day I learned that Oscar had an illegitimate daughter, I stopped planning even a single day for him. Instead, I devoted myself wholeheartedly to my career, to loving myself, and to spending all my time on myself and my child. Only afterward did I realize that living this way felt unbelievably good. I would never again make someone else's wedding dress for them. The phone rang again. It was still Oscar calling. The beautician, Kelly, answered it for me. The other end was very noisy, glasses clinking, women laughing sweetly, and Oscar's drunken voice. "How about we go eat Japanese food together tonight? It's a new place opened by a friend of mine. The head chef has won an international award." Lying there, I instructed, "Hang up for me. It's too noisy. It's affecting my mood." The call ended. My world became completely quiet. Chapter 3. In the eyes of outsiders, countless people would do anything to squeeze their way through the doors of the Oscar family. And I, a poor girl from the slums, being able to marry Oscar was, in their eyes, undeniably marrying above my station, and I should have been satisfied. But I truly didn't love Oscar anymore. I allowed him to have a female confidant, and I didn't care where his heart truly belonged. Oscar and I met on the HKU campus when we were 20. It was 1988, and Hong Kong's uncertain future had triggered a wave of emigration. That year, Nationwide enrollment was only 600,000. Being able to enter a university campus already spoke for one's luck and ability, and the campus was filled everywhere with elitism and arrogance. While other rich young men had already settled their futures early on, Oscar was in no hurry at all. Every day, he drove his luxury car with its special license plate around campus, smiling 3 parts out of 10 at everyone he met. If I went out 10 times, I would run into him 8. At first, I thought he had a good temper, or that he simply liked to smile. Later, that group of lackeys around him came up to me and insisted on taking me out to eat. Miss Celine, after all these years, this is the first time we've ever heard someone put it that way. Don't you know this kind of thing depends on the person? After the thin veil was pierced, Oscar began pursuing me openly and unabashedly, driving his flashy sports car, waiting outside the classroom where I had class, taking me to expensive restaurants, saying grandly that he wanted to give me the best. Whenever I rejected him, he never felt embarrassed in the slightest. Instead, the more setbacks he met, the more determined he became. Every day I was busy with my studio's business, figuring out how to make money. I had no mind to play around with an idle rich boy like him. So every time I turned him down, I did it mercilessly. But Oscar's friends were the type to get more excited the bigger the scene, and they egged things on even more. At the end of the year, my adoptive mother became gravely ill. Oscar put away his usual unserious attitude and quietly arranged everything. He hired the best doctors, settled all the bills, and then looked at me with a face full of tenderness. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Nothing will happen. There was light in 20-year-old Oscar's eyes. When he looked at me, his eyes were so full of feeling that they seemed to burn. I once thought that was love. Only later did I understand that it might have been nothing more than a passing whim. Chapter 4. After the treatment was over, I took the mirror the beautician handed me. The woman inside it radiated carefully groomed refinement from every strand of hair. Her skin was delicate, and the condition around her eyes was also exceptionally good. Kelly stood to one side and said with a smile, "Ma'am, among all the clients I've served, you are truly aging in reverse." I let out a laugh, did not deny it, and calmly accepted her praise. "And among all the beauty teams I've worked with, your techniques are the best too." I had introduced more than a dozen major clients to Kelly's team, and every time she saw me, she was beaming with delight. My reason for choosing her was very sufficient. Whether I was aging backward or not didn't matter. What mattered was that she provided emotional value exactly in the right measure. I had just entered the room and was about to rest when the door was pushed open. At 40, Oscar still had a handsome face. He was tall and well-built. Although he was no longer as dashing as before, his bearing was still extraordinary. So over all these years, the women fluttering around him had never once disappeared. A stack of photos was placed on the table in front of me. "Celine, I need an explanation." I casually picked one up and said with a smile, "He's a photographer who came back from abroad. His father is British, and his mother is from Hong Kong. This time he came back especially to photograph the Olympics, and in a few days he'll be heading to Jingbei." Oscar said nothing, and his expression grew increasingly ugly. I flipped through the whole stack of photos. They actually captured me pretty well. Were these taken by a private investigator, or by paparazzi you sent out? Oscar, be generous. Don't get jealous for no reason. It makes you look petty and graceless. I judged him without the slightest politeness and met those stunned eyes head on. Chapter 5. Oscar opened his mouth again and again, but said nothing. The things I had said should not have sounded unfamiliar to him. After all, every single sentence had once come out of his own mouth. When I first found out that Oscar had cheated, I cried. I made a scene. I became hysterical, and I was a complete mess. At that time, our second child had just been born. I cried as I demanded to know why he would treat me that way, why he would betray our love, and why he would turn our marriage into a joke. I cried so hard that I fell apart. But Oscar looked at me without the slightest reaction and calmly asked if I had gone crazy. He said he did not understand why I had to make a fuss with him. Obviously, I could have pretended to know nothing and gone on being my rich wife in peace. So why did I insist on dragging those things out into the open? For the person in the weaker position in a relationship, even feeling wronged is a mistake, a kind of sin, because everyone will accuse you, saying that you were the one who married above your station. So why are you endlessly making trouble? I have always remembered that day. Oscar's mother came storming into my office and demanded to know whether I was the one who had leaked the news outside. After I denied it, she did not fully believe me. Don't fight with Oscar. What is the point of making such a scene? The women outside are fickle and frivolous. There are plenty of them who want to climb the social ladder. Is it really worth flying into a rage at your own husband because of them? Oscar is immature and likes novelty. Once this phase passes, won't he get tired of it? You are his wife. Your position is as solid as a mountain. What are those women supposed to be? They're nothing but canaries that can't be acknowledged in public. Why should you lower yourself to argue with them? Hearing those words, I stood there in a daze for a long time, unable to respond. Oscar's mother thought I was deliberately going against her, and immediately lost her temper. Celine, think about what your status used to be. Don't forget whose help got you out of that swamp called Shamshuepa. Our family gave you wealth and luxury, silks and fine food. Without my son, how could you possibly have what you have now? If you make this matter so big, are you trying to turn our family into the laughingstock of the whole city? Are you planning to let that Misty get her wish and walk through the doors of this family? Or do you want Oscar to divorce you? Celine, don't be like those foolish women outside who can't tell what matters. At that moment, I finally understood. In the eyes of Oscar's mother, that noble woman, the feelings and dignity of poor people were not important things at all. My mother-in-law left with elegant composure, leaving me standing there alone like a ridiculous clown. Chapter 6. That day, I asked myself again and again, could it really have been my fault? My husband had a change of heart, so why was I the one being blamed instead? Later, I understood. The one who loves more always lives a little more painfully. The one who says I love you first is always the one who leaves first, while the one who falls later is always the one who cannot let go. Back then, Oscar pursued me relentlessly. Because of the huge gap between our two families, I had never agreed to be with him. Later, he became more and more sincere. He lent money for my adoptive mother's medical expenses, and he stepped in to help me when a client tried to force me to drink. When he was with me, he handled every detail exactly right. Little by little, I agreed to be with him. At that time, I could never have imagined that we would end up in such a hopeless mess. Chapter 7. Seeing me remain silent, Oscar's eyes turned red. Celine, you stopped loving me a long time ago, didn't you? He looked like a pitiful man who had been abandoned, struggling on the verge of collapse, insisting on forcing out an answer. But in truth, the one who had been abandoned was the me from back then. How ridiculous. He had already had his fill of a life with multiple women. He had already enjoyed everything there was to enjoy. After a few years, he actually came back wearing the posture of a victim and turned around to condemn me instead. Oscar, I looked at him with amused interest. Don't you think it's a little late to be asking that question now? He lifted his head. So, you admit there's something going on between you and that man, right? It sounded like the biggest joke in the world to me, and I let out a low laugh. Look at yourself now. Where is that once high-spirited young master? Oscar, I've treated this marriage far more sincerely than you ever did. So what gives you the right to accuse me? We're not young anymore. Do you really have to force everything into the open like this? How is that any different from humiliating yourself? Just as he had once done to me, I spoke with biting cruelty, mocking him without the slightest restraint, reclaiming from him the self-respect I had once lost. Trading blow for blow really was exhilarating. My mood kept getting better. Tell me. Oscar gripped my arm tightly. Celine, when did it start between you two? Was it that I didn't give you enough money? Or are you no longer satisfied with the position of a rich wife? You smiled so happily while having dinner with another man outside. Have you ever thought about how long it's been since you smiled at me like that? We used to be so in love. Something in Oscar seemed to have snapped, and he kept dragging me into reminiscing about the past. I couldn't help letting out a mocking laugh. Mr. Oscar, since when have you started growing younger with age? Love or no love, isn't that the kind of thing only young people like to ask about? What? After spending so long with those young mistresses outside, have you started learning from them and chasing true love too? Chapter 8. I looked up at the window. The sky was gradually darkening, and the nightlife on Hong Kong Island was only just beginning. Neon lights flickered in an endless spectacle of luxury and excess. After facing off for a long time, Oscar's body slowly slid down along the corner of the wall, his head tilted to one side, his back facing me, and he unexpectedly looked somewhat desolate. Even after I had finished dinner and gone back upstairs, he was still in the same state as when I had left. His hair was a mess, his suit jacket had been thrown aside, and his tie had been yanked loose. From the moment he came back, I had known he was drunk. Otherwise, he would not have asked me something as absurd as whether I loved him. His stomach was bad, and drinking made him feel awful afterward. I could tell, but I couldn't be bothered to care. Sitting on the bed, I glanced at the messy floor and said in disgust, "I don't like you staying in my room. Please leave. I want to rest. You really don't love me anymore." Oscar's voice was hoarse, but I truly do regret it. I curled my lips slightly. How much could the regret of a former lover possibly be worth? At most, it was just that what he could not have would always stir in his heart. Oscar had grown used to my loving him with my whole heart. Then one day, he suddenly realized that I was no longer under his control, no longer circling around him, and he simply couldn't adapt to it or accept it. "Oscar," I heard myself speak with a smile, "do you still remember what exactly you did on the day your illegitimate daughter was born?" Chapter 9. The day Oscar's illegitimate daughter was born was an utterly ordinary day. At the time, I still didn't know that Oscar was keeping another woman outside. I was stupidly being kept in the dark. A friend couldn't bear to watch anymore and placed an entertainment tabloid in front of me. Oscar's mistress had published the news of joyfully welcoming a baby girl in the paper, formally declaring war on me. In the photo on the page, 2 large hands were wrapped around a baby's tiny hand. One of those hands wore a wedding ring identical to mine. That was Oscar. How ridiculous. Wearing the matching wedding ring we had given each other when we got married, he publicly announced the birth of a daughter with his mistress. From that moment on, I began paying attention. On the one hand, to prevent my own children from being hurt. On the other hand, to arrange for a private investigator to look into everything carefully. Very soon, I obtained all the information about that woman. She had once worked part-time at a club, where she met Oscar. Later, after a one-night fling, she very fortunately became pregnant. Oscar had always been a philanderer. He became attached to that girl and allowed her to keep the child. And so, 10 months later, he and his mistress publicly announced the birth of their daughter. A year later, at my daughter's first birthday banquet, Oscar brought his mistress home. He held back somewhat and had her stay in the guest room with the child, not letting her appear in public. After all, that girl had been rather well known at the club, and quite a few rich young men probably recognized her. Oscar knew that his parents would absolutely never accept a daughter-in-law like that, and he had never planned to marry her, but he did not want his child to live nameless and without status in the shadows. That night, Oscar carried his illegitimate daughter out for the whole family to see. The old master and my mother-in-law were furious, their expressions changing at once. They had someone escort that woman out. As for the child, in the end, they could not bear to throw her out as well. I stood to one side, my heart turning cold little by little. For several days in a row, autumn rain kept falling. At night, the nanny taking care of my daughter forgot to close the window, causing her fever to spike to 40 degrees. As I sat in the hospital room holding my daughter, whose face was flushed red with fever, while she received in 4 drip, Oscar sent me a message. "Can you raise that child? She'll call you mom just like Sophia does. And when she grows up, she'll be filial to you." How ridiculous. Our child was lying weakly in a hospital bed, burning up so badly that even her breath came out hot. And at a time like that, he was planning things for his illegitimate daughter. From beginning to end, I never agreed. I did not yield even half a step. Chapter 10. After my son Lucas returned from his study tour abroad, I asked for sick leave for him on the grounds that he was always coughing. He was a well-behaved and intelligent child, valued since childhood by the 2 elders. This time, because of his illness, his grandfather and grandmother were anxious and distressed. Seeing that after 10 days to half a month he still was not getting better, they invited a master from outside. By pure coincidence, I happened to know that master. When I was little, my adoptive mother and I lived in a Tong Lao. Back then, that master had only been an unemployed charlatan. mooching meals from every household. When he saw that I was clever as a child, he even wanted to take me as his apprentice, frightening my adoptive mother so much that she repeatedly warned me to study hard and absolutely never follow just anyone who beckoned me along. After pocketing my check, the master looked grave after touring the old residence. 2 against 2. 2 against 2. The 2 children in the Oscar family have both fallen ill because someone is clashing with them. Has someone new come into the house recently? My father-in-law and mother-in-law were stunned, then repeatedly called him master, praising how accurate he was. At first, they had only believed it 90%. After hearing the master's explanation, they believed it completely. After they carefully explained the recent events, the master stroked his non-existent beard and meticulously interpreted the illegitimate daughter's birth chart. This child has the fate of a solitary star of calamity, a destiny with no siblings. If you bring her into the family, then she gains an older brother and a younger sister. But her fate is one without siblings. Wouldn't that be taboo? She would bring harm to your family's original 2 children. My father-in-law and mother-in-law looked grave, and immediately called Oscar, telling him to take the illegitimate daughter away. They would rather give Oscar's mistress a large sum of money and send both mother and daughter abroad. When it came to extremely important matters, Oscar had no say. Watching his parents refuse no matter what to acknowledge his illegitimate daughter, he had no choice but to have someone send the mistress and child away. The bar girl who had sent me messages to provoke me had her plans come to nothing. I will never forget the night my daughter's high fever turned into pneumonia. She had said with a smile that the family only needed one granddaughter. That night, my 9-year-old eldest son, Lucas, came to my room. After playing with his younger sister for a while, he stood to one side looking at me. I touched his head and the word slipped out, "I'm sorry. You and your sister are both still children. I didn't want either of you dragged into any of this. I wanted you to have a perfect childhood. But in the end, I couldn't manage even one of those things. I failed to keep this family together." I had originally thought he would not understand what I was saying, but instead, he tightly held my hand. "Mom, it's not only mothers and daughters who are natural allies. Mothers and sons are too. The one who has failed this family is not you, and you do not owe me or my sister anything. I am your child. I will always stand by your side." That night, besides feeling moved, I gained an extra measure of unstoppable courage. Again and again, I told myself that I had to do everything in my power to push both of my children into the position of heirs. In the blink of an eye, 9 years passed. Both children had grown up, and I had finally made it through. Chapter 11. After that drunken confrontation, Oscar and I fell into a standoff. He seemed to be serious this time, racking his brains to win me back. Company affairs were busy, yet Oscar still made time to come home punctually every evening for dinner. At the long dining table sat the whole family. Oscar sat on one side, while I sat at the farthest seat from him, with countless exquisite dishes separating us. He was scheming for a chance to talk to me, but my gaze never once rested on him. Instead, I focused entirely on watching my daughter Sophia eat. After dinner, my mother-in-law hesitated as if she wanted to say something, then asked me to go with her to her room for a moment. This conversation, too, had nothing new about it. It was nothing more than apologizing for the careless things she had once said, then awkwardly trying to persuade us to reconcile. Oscar and I had already reached the end of our feelings and could never return to the past. She did not feel comfortable saying such things, and I had no desire to hear them. Ever since she had lashed out and scolded me 9 years ago, she had apologized to me many times for what she said that night. In truth, I had long stopped caring about those words, but the invisible thorn between us had never disappeared. It had nothing to do with forgiveness or not. Once words have been spoken, they can never be treated as though they were never said. Chapter 12. Actually, my relationship with Oscar's mother had eased for a time before. It was just that now. It had gone back to the way it used to be. I still remember the first year after Oscar and I got married. That day, our wedding was extraordinarily grand. We booked the biggest and most luxurious banquet hall in all Hong Kong, and the venue was filled with flowers flown in from overseas. The front pages of all the major newspapers competed to report on it. Between the lines, the articles were full of disdain for my background and sour mockery of me, wearing a priceless wedding gown and heavy antique jewelry. I held onto Oscar's arm, walked down the red carpet, and received the baptism of everyone's gaze. I remember one of Oscar's female cousins once looking me up and down disdainfully while holding a champagne glass. "You really think you've climbed onto a high branch? My cousin is just in it for the novelty. The day he comes to his senses, he'll definitely dump you. You'd better take advantage of your youth and get as much as you can right now. Otherwise, in just a few years, you'll become a discarded wife." I did not argue back. In a certain sense, she really did have the standing to sneer at me. As the only girl among Oscar's generation in the family, she had been pampered by her parents and grandparents since childhood, able to obtain the rarest things in the world with ease. So the fact that she looked down on me was entirely within my expectations. Even Oscar's parents looked down on me. In truth, it was only because their only son was too stubborn and insisted on marrying no one but me. For the sake of their son's wishes and the family's reputation, they still attended the wedding. But that day, after all the guests and reporters had left, they never once gave me a pleasant look again. I had originally thought that my relationship with this family would remain in that state forever. But 2 years later, Oscar's father met with an accident, and the company's power fell into others' hands, while the collateral branches of the Oscar family watched like tigers eyeing prey. Oscar was still very young and had not truly taken over the company. After his father died, he completely lost his bearings and could not hold things together. Very soon, the company fell into a public relations storm because of poor operations, and because there was no capable leader. The problems were not resolved for a long time. Within the span of just 1 month, the stock price plummeted and the production lines broke down. Many business partners, afraid that the Oscar family would no longer be able to settle payments properly, would rather breach their contracts than continue the cooperation midway. Chapter 13. At that moment of instability and crisis, I stepped forward. In order to make money, I had already opened a studio while I was still in school. After selling half of the studio to my business partner, I got a sum of money. I kept pouring that money into Oscar's father's company, and it was like dropping it into a bottomless pit without even a splash. The funding gap was simply too huge, and every step was difficult. But there was no other way. I could only grit my teeth and hold on with him. Every day, I stayed up until 4 in the morning writing proposals, humbly begging business partners to give us a few more days, going door to door to shareholders' homes to smooth things over and sell them a vision. As a poor person who grew up in a harsh environment, I have always believed that my greatest strength is being highly socialized. In other words, I am worldly and slick, speaking like a human to humans and like a ghost to ghosts. I can talk the dead into sounding alive, and the living into sounding dead. Those shareholders, although they insisted on putting profit first, were not completely immune to pressure or persuasion. It was not that Oscar had no ability at all to run the company. It was just that he was a rich young master raised in a greenhouse. Although he had received the best resources and possessed solid professional knowledge, he could not throw caution to the wind, nor could he force himself to say those polished things against his conscience. But I had sold newspapers in the streets in elementary school to earn the margin, done wholesale stationery in middle school, written my business plan on the very first day of university, and opened a studio with classmates in my junior year. So I had abundant practical experience, and because I had endured cold looks since childhood, I never regarded pride as something too important. As long as there was even the slightest chance of turning things around, even if it meant lowering myself and begging others, I was willing to do it. After a year of bitterly holding things together, the group situation improved greatly. Everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Oscar admitted his shortcomings and no longer swaggered around outside putting on the airs of a rich second-generation heir. Oscar's grandmother gathered the clan in the ancestral hall and added my name to the family genealogy. Although I did not care much about that sort of thing, it still counted, in the end, as being accepted by this family. The funniest part was Oscar's mother and female cousin. Late one night, I went downstairs to get some water. The motion sensor light in the living room turned on, and the two people sneaking around by the door found themselves staring at me face to face. They were Oscar's mother and female cousin. Sneaking in late at night, they had come to place the gift they had prepared and a handwritten apology letter on the table in the living room. But who would have thought it would be such a coincidence that I would catch them right then? Looking at their flushed faces, I smiled and greeted them. Oscar's female cousin blinked at me with starry eyes, and from then on treated me as her idol, calling me sister-in-law at every turn. And Oscar's mother also fully acknowledged me as her daughter-in-law. Funny, when people are down and out, they are always grateful for the sincerity of others. But once they rise again, past kindness is written off in one stroke. Oscar's mother had once genuinely treated me well, but the moment it involved her son, she threw all of that aside again. To her, from beginning to end, I was no different from an outsider. It sounds sad when put that way, but I got over it very quickly. After all, I was not raised in any warm environment either. I had already endured plenty of pain when I was young, so much so that later on, no matter what kind of betrayal I suffered, I could survive it. Only by not giving your heart can you avoid heartbreak. Only by putting away all your sincerity can you obtain more tangible benefits. Chapter 14. Sometimes, when I think about it carefully, the first 9 years of my marriage were the happiest time of my life. My husband was devoted, my mother-in-law approved of me, and my children were healthy. Oscar and I spent a period of time deeply in love. Later on, as his career succeeded, he slowly began to lose himself. After repeated success, a person grows arrogant, attributing favorable timing, favorable conditions, and the help of everyone around him entirely to his own merit. Oscar, untouched by the stench of money, was like a peacock spreading its tail. He had a kind of childish innocence about the world, a wildly unconstrained imagination, a handsome appearance and a free spirit. To someone like me, who had suffered so much since childhood, that was almost a fatal attraction. My past and the environment I grew up in were far too complicated, so I like people with simple minds. That was the biggest reason I chose Oscar. Being with a happy person allowed me, for a little while, to forget those days that would make me cry the moment I thought too deeply about them. But I overlooked the fact that people change. As the people around Oscar fawned over him and flattered him, endless scandals followed one after another. A popular young actress, a refined socialite, a gifted dancer, a pageant champion with a perfect figure. The female confidants around Oscar changed even more frequently than his clothes. I went from being utterly shocked and unable to accept it, to heartbroken and hysterical, and then to the numb indifference of now. Even I do not know how I got through those first few years. Oscar's family felt guilty toward me and repeatedly apologized to me on Oscar's behalf. But Oscar was something else. With an arrogant posture, he assured me that as long as I behaved myself, tolerated his private life, and turned a blind eye, the position of Mrs. Oscar would always be mine, and the wealth and luxury would be inexhaustible. I did not listen to a single word of the nonsense he said. Instead, I simply went about doing the things I wanted to do. I am someone with an extremely strong ability to adapt. Emotionally detaching was not especially quick, but logically it was easy for me to make peace with it. In the blink of an eye, 9 years passed. I paid attention to my health, to the well-being of my son studying at a secondary school abroad, took careful care of my daughter, and lived fairly well. Only after a person gets past the hurdle of love do they realize that only by casting love aside can the heart truly find peace. There are far too many things more important than love. There is no need to return to a marriage that has already been stained once before. Chapter 15. At the end of the year, another of Oscar's female confidants, Abigail, made her grand entrance. She could also be considered one of his old flames, roughly from the same period as Misty. The only difference was that one had already vanished without a trace, while the other had made a comeback. "Ma'am." Abigail stood on the expensive carpet in the living room, dressed in a soft pink Chanel suit, smiling gently. "I'm attending the company banquet tomorrow night, but my gown was accidentally damaged. I heard you like collecting dresses and have many rare pieces. I was wondering if it would be convenient for you to lend me one in an emergency?" Her attitude was humble, but she could not hide the smugness in her eyes. Back then, she had done very well in the company and had been the youngest assistant by Oscar's side. After staying with Oscar for several years and seeing that she still could not rise to the position she wanted, she married and went abroad. Now, her husband was gone, and she had come back, rejoining the group. After going in circles, she was still only 33. In the past, whenever I encountered this kind of person who came to my door to provoke me, I could never help getting angry. I hated Oscar for tacitly allowing others to cause trouble right in front of me. I questioned these people's sense of morality and could not understand how anyone could go that far. But every single time, The one who ended up hurting was always me. Later, I understood that shameless people often have very low moral boundaries. They simply do not care what they do, as long as they achieve their goal. Getting angry with that kind of person is no different from harming your own body. Looking at Abigail, I let out a faint smile and readily agreed. Of course. She froze for a second. When she recovered, the curve of her lips became even more obvious. It's only one dress. I hope you won't mind. Her tone carried contempt and veiled sarcasm. Yet she still put on a false show of telling me not to mind. The me from before had hated that fake, affected look of hers. But the person she was facing now was no longer the woman I used to be. Why would I mind? I stood up and led Abigail to my collection room. Miss Abigail is short of a dress and came to me for help. Of course I have to do you this favor. There was resentment on her face, but she could not argue back. After all, the dresses I collected were all haute couture. She truly could not afford them. My walk-in wardrobe was on the top floor, with huge floor-to-ceiling windows facing the harbor. A great deal of money had been spent to build this place. Every piece of clothing had its own separate storage cabinet, kept at a constant temperature and humidity to preserve the garments as well as possible. Soft light fell across the dazzling array of gowns. Every piece of clothing here, every accessory, every set of jewelry, was part of my collection. Some were gifts Oscar had given me, and others were trophies from auctions we attended. In short, every single piece carried memories of the past. I used to always look back on the road Oscar and I had traveled together. Only later did I realize that I was the only one trapped in those old memories. Chapter 16. Abigail moved back and forth in front of the transparent display cases, her eyes full of amazement. After choosing for quite a while, she stopped in front of a light purple qipao made of Yunjin brocade. Oscar had commissioned it for me from a Suzhou master before he cheated. At the time, the qipao master had already announced publicly that he was old and losing his eyesight and would no longer accept any orders. Oscar had been deeply annoyed, hating that he had come one step too late. I kept telling him it didn't matter, but he still could not accept the outcome and brought generous gifts to the master's home. He went once every 2 days, persuading and pleading, showing more than enough sincerity, and only then did the master agree to take the custom order. After a long wait, I received that qipao. A piece that could be called a work of art, running my hand over the Yunjin pattern on it. I was so overjoyed that I was speechless with amazement. Oscar stood to the side watching me, smiling in his eyes. Well, I told you I could move that master, didn't I? Celine, anything you like, no matter how difficult it is, I will place it in your hands and bring it right in front of you. At the time, I believed he truly loved me, and later, he truly failed me. Celine, I want to wear this one. Sure, I agreed readily. I'll have someone bring it to you in a moment. Abigail looked delighted and began choosing jewelry again. She had very good taste and picked the most expensive piece inside. It was a sapphire necklace, with a 20-carat center stone and tiny diamonds set all around it. The diamonds used the simplest cutting technique. With the beauty of natural shaping, they served perfectly as accompaniment without stealing the spotlight. Anyone who knew jewelry should have been able to tell at a glance that this was the necklace I had worn at my wedding. Oscar's engagement gift to me. Back then, that wedding had been called the wedding of the century, and the video had circulated online for years, getting pulled back out for discussion every so often. I did not believe Abigail had never seen the video of me wearing that necklace and marrying Oscar with a face full of joy. By doing this, she was clearly trying to provoke me. Ma'am, may I wear this necklace? Abigail asked me with an eager face. I smiled. Of course. I glanced at my phone. By my count, it had already been half an hour since the time Oscar had said he was getting off work. It was about time for him to come back. I was already impatient to watch the scene of him confronting his old flame. Chapter 17. What do you mean, good? A low, familiar voice rang out. At some point, Oscar had appeared at the doorway, dressed in a well-tailored suit. Every inch the image of a successful man. His gaze swept over Abigail and finally landed on me. Celine, I bought that necklace back from a collector. Blue is your favorite color. You clearly said you would cherish it for the rest of your life. So why are you lending it to someone else? And have you forgotten how hard it was to get this qipao? Why would you hand it over to someone else to trample on my feelings? Abigail had never seen Oscar this angry before and timidly tried to explain. She spoke in an affected, sweet voice, and it sounded completely out of place. Oscar cut her off sharply and continued confronting me. Celine, is this how you treat the things I gave you? How did I never realize before that you were so generous? I remained silent the entire time, neither explaining nor arguing. After a long while, I smiled at Oscar. It's only an object. If it can help Miss Abigail, who doesn't have a gown, then isn't that a good thing? She's worthy of that? Oscar snapped loudly. Abigail looked utterly incredulous and ran off crying. How laughable. Just like 10 years ago, all she still knew how to do was lie and cry. In the enormous dress collection room, only Oscar and I were left. He walked toward me step by step. Celine, do you really hate me that much? Meeting his accusing gaze, I let out a contemptuous laugh. Oscar, do you still remember the year Sophia had just been born? That year, there were simply too many women trying to force their way into a higher position. Besides Misty, who came pressuring us with a child in her arms, there was also the young and beautiful Abigail. At a business banquet, I recognized at a glance that the gown Oscar's female secretary was wearing had been taken from my collection room. It was a work by a French artist whose sketches had won several major awards. When the finished piece came out, it amazed countless people. At the time, I was on a business trip in France, and taking advantage of being there, I bought the dress and had it shipped back home. Chapter 18. To this day, I still remember how undignified I was that day. How I screamed myself hoarse arguing with Oscar, demanding to know why he was treating me that way. Why having entangled himself with one Misty was not enough. Why he had to go after even his secretary. To him, my anger was nothing but a joke. He cut me off impatiently and asked why I was being so petty, unwilling to lend even a single dress to his secretary. He even brought up my background, casually revealing his sense of superiority and his contempt for me. Without me, could you have a walk-in closet this large and this good? Abigail is young and beautiful. It's just that her family background is not good, and that's held her back. You came from the slums too, so you know how important face is to a person. She didn't have a gown, so I let her go up to the top floor and pick one. Is that really so unbearable for you? Oscar coldly warned me not to get caught up in catty rivalry between women, then stormed off. The next day, an entertainment tabloid published photos of him entering and leaving a hotel with his female secretary. That beautiful but poor secretary sent me an explicit photo. Oscar was lying beside her, half naked. What the two of them had done the night before was obvious at a glance. Oscar, do you still remember what you said that day? I smiled as I asked again. Didn't I do exactly as you wished? Wasn't I generous enough? Then why are you angry again this time? Do you think the dress I lent out wasn't noble enough? Not high-end enough? Not good enough for your old flame? If that's the case, that's fine. Let her choose another one. Call her over and let her pick again. Celine. Oscar cut me off. His eyes rimmed red. Don't talk to me like that. What's wrong with the way I'm talking? I asked innocently. Oscar, if there's anything you're unhappy with me about, just say it. I'll change all of it. But I don't need you to change. Oscar lost control. As hysterical as I once was, with not a shred of dignity left. What I want is for you to love me the way you used to. What is this now? What you feel for me is tolerance, not love. You used to throw your arms around me and act spoiled when I got home from work, when other women secretly slipped me hotel key cards. You used to get jealous in those quiet little ways, and I had to coax you desperately before you'd calm down. You used to be a vivid, living person, but now, you're only pretending to be warm, pretending to love me, when in fact you're colder than anyone. I was wrong. The old me was too arrogant. I thought that even if I cheated, you would still forgive me. I thought that because I had the financial upper hand, you were supposed to keep tolerating me. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I turned and left, too unwilling to waste another word on him. Chapter 19. The next evening, after attending the banquet, Abigail happily posted photos on her blog, focusing especially on the necklace and the cheapao. She was probably trying to stage a beautiful comeback. Unfortunately, she forgot that some things, even if she wore them on her body, would never become hers, nor could they ever bear her name. In the second half of the night, the paid online accounts I had arranged in advance began fanning the flames. digging up her entire past without leaving anything out. The old news about her and Oscar entering and leaving hotels was pushed onto the trending searches once again after so many years. Looking at the screen full of condemnation and attacks, I felt immensely satisfied. Causing trouble in front of me once should have been enough. So why come back a second time and provoke me again without knowing your place? A weakness handed right to me, how could I not seize it tightly? The next day, the trending topic continued to gain momentum, and the Hong Kong Morning Post even ran a special feature digging into Oscar's years of love and hate with his mistresses. By noon on the third day, Abigail had deleted her blog, but the incident still had not died down. Public opinion shifted from condemning the other woman to sympathizing with me, the lawful wife. Of course, that shift in public sentiment had been planned in advance by my team. When I married Oscar 20 years ago, plenty of people cursed me too, but now, the main group of internet users had already changed. On top of that, Oscar and I really had lived lovingly together for 10 years. So more and more people began lamenting our love. Seeing that the timing was about right, I posted on my blog with pointed meaning. Sometimes I keep feeling like something is missing from the house, and it turns out it was borrowed away. But I've always believed that if something is borrowed, it should also be returned. However, to this day, I still haven't found the dress and necklace that disappeared 10 years ago. Maybe they're just lost. Very quickly, my name became associated with the words fighting back hard and humorous. As the media dug deeper, my resume was laid out in full view. From childhood, I studied diligently, and at 16 I entered HKU with a high ranking. 2 years after marriage, I saved the family group on my own when it was in dire straits, and 3 years later I took over 3 subsidiaries at the same time, with profits rising 700% over the previous year. Later, I entered the board of directors at the family group headquarters and served as co-CEO of the group and deputy general manager of the brand division. At the same time, I had several companies of my own under my name, with a measurable market value. This time, I did not let the prey who came to my door get away. Instead, I stepped on Abigail to climb higher, gaining both fame and profit, and became the kind of inspiring powerful heroine many netizens admired. Reputation is hollow, but it can still build momentum. My eldest son is already an adult. In a few years, he will enter the family group to gain experience. As for my daughter, she is already 10 years old. I look forward to her growing up and becoming just as accomplished, and I will also gradually bring her into the public eye. As their mother, I will pave the way for them in advance. Chapter 20. When July arrived, the house became lively. My eldest son, Lucas, had returned from abroad. With his outstanding grades, he successfully received offers from multiple world-renowned universities. Every one of them was excellent, but in the end, which one he chose would depend on his own preference. I have always practiced an encouraging style of education with my children, respecting their choices as much as possible. My son's coming-of-age ceremony was arranged by my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They had always been satisfied with this grandson, so much so that they wished they could keep him by their side at all times and introduce him to everyone. Compared with their own son, who was hopeless beyond repair, the grandson who had been clever since childhood seemed much more presentable. When I went downstairs in the morning, my daughter had already been driven to school by the chauffeur. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had gone to a friend's banquet, and Oscar was nowhere to be seen. Only my son was left at the dining table. He was eating very slowly, as if he were waiting for me. "Mom," after I sat down, he spoke. I picked up a piece of toast and answered with a smile. "What is it?" He had always been a child with strong opinions of his own. It had been a long time since I had seen him so conflicted. "Don't tell me you've fallen in love," I teased. He smiled too. "Nothing like that. I have something else to say." He paused for a moment, his expression turning more and more serious. "Mom, divorce Dad." My hand paused, and I raised my head. "I know these past 9 years haven't been good for you at all. All the awful messes my dad made, no matter who had to bear them, they would find them impossible to accept. For me, for my sister, for helping us protect everything that belongs to us. You've already endured 9 extra years in this marriage. Now let me take care of you and my sister." What he said nearly brought me to tears. 9 years ago, when Oscar had hurt me again and again until I was covered in wounds, I had also thought about divorce. Through countless sleepless nights, I asked myself over and over what choice would truly be the best one. I had thought about divorcing him and walking away. I had also thought about tearing things apart with Oscar completely. But in the end, when I looked at my daughter, who was only 1 year old, and my son, who was clearly still so young yet forced himself to act mature, I hesitated. Late at night, I kept looking through Oscar's widely circulated scandals again and again, rereading the provocative messages sent by his mistresses. In the end, I decided not to divorce him for the time being. If Oscar could have one illegitimate daughter outside, then he could have many more children with other women. If I divorced him in anger, the people who would benefit the most would be the women outside. If I were no longer occupying that position, then the day he had a whim to remarry, any newly born child would be a legitimate child born within wedlock. I would never allow anyone to take what belonged to my children. I'm already an adult, and Grandma has been intentionally grooming me in one way or another. Even if Dad remarries in the future and has other children, the age gap between us will already be impossible to overcome. You really could keep dragging things out with Father and wait until after I inherit the family business before divorcing him. But I don't want that. I don't want to watch you waste year after year in a marriage that has long been beyond saving. You are free. You can absolutely have a life of your own. My sister and I will still be your children, and no one can change the blood bond between the three of us. I will work hard, succeed in my studies, inherit the family business as early as possible, and take good care of my sister. Mom, for the sake of helping me protect those things you've already endured for 9 years, don't endure anymore. I let out a long breath. In this life, the one thing I will never regret is giving birth to you and your sister. Chapter 21. I was a wild child abandoned by my biological parents. At the age when other children were snuggling in their parents' arms, I had already started delivering newspapers through the streets and alleys, figuring out how to do small business. My adoptive mother was in poor health, and she was 45 years older than me. At the age when others were becoming grandmothers, she found me, a sickly child with barely half a breath left, at her doorstep. She was the famously unlucky woman of the slums, lame in one leg, abandoned by her husband just after getting married. That man took her dowry and ran off with his so-called little sister. And before leaving, he even sneered that she was a jinx, because I had witnessed my adoptive mother's hardships since childhood. I told myself very early on that I had to make a lot of money someday. That year, I knelt sincerely before the Mazu temple and made 3 wishes. I wanted to become a wealthy boss rolling in money. I would definitely make sure my adoptive mother had more money than she could ever spend. And when I had children in the future, I would love them very, very much. I would absolutely never abandon them like my biological parents had abandoned me. I knew too clearly how hard life was for a child who was not loved by their parents. What my biological parents never gave me, I would definitely give to my children. Chapter 22. Now, I am 40 years old. Every goal I set back then has been achieved. What I have gained in this life has already far exceeded anything I once imagined. I have no regrets at all. That night, my son's words repeated in my mind again and again. I admit it, I was tempted. As early as 9 years ago, I had already told myself that the moment my children could stand on their own, I would divorce Oscar immediately. Now, everything had come even earlier than I had expected. Late at night, I scrolled through my phone out of boredom. Oscar, now middle-aged, was still entangled in endless scandals. Sometimes, I could not even understand where he got so much energy from. When I opened the calendar, I saw the character memorial marked beneath the date. Today was actually the death anniversary of Oscar's illegitimate daughter. Oscar's illegitimate daughter had been in poor health from the moment she was born, and at the age of 3, she was taken away by an infectious disease. Oscar was devastated and, that very day, booked a flight to Britain to accompany that woman. At the time, I had even truly thought that he and that woman were true love. But now, after only a few years, he had long since forgotten what day it was. This morning, Oscar had not eaten breakfast at home. I thought he had gone to the cemetery to visit his illegitimate daughter. Who would have thought he had gone off to cultivate another new female confidant instead? Sure enough, a leopard never changes its spots. Chapter 23. The next day, I took out the divorce agreement I had printed in advance and placed it on Oscar's desk. He looked up from a pile of documents, his gaze falling on the bold black words on the first page, and his brows instantly knitted together. He looked at me in disbelief, picked up the document, flipped through several pages quickly, and his expression darkened at a visible speed. What does this mean? It means exactly what you think it means. There was a trace of panic in Oscar's eyes. Celine, what are you making a scene about now? I've already been trying to win you back. So what exactly do you mean by this now? We've had so many years together, and now you suddenly pull out a divorce agreement. Don't you think that's absurd? It's written very clearly in the agreement. I stood in front of the desk and answered him calmly. Read it through. If there's no problem, then sign it. The lawyer will come pick it up tomorrow. Oscar threw the document into the trash can. He tried to grab my arm, but I turned sideways and avoided him. His hand froze in midair, and his face turned even uglier. We've been through so much together, and you're just going to divorce me like that? What about the 2 children? Lucas is already an adult. He doesn't need you anymore. But what about our daughter? Can you really bear to let her be so young and already have divorced parents? The moment he brought up our daughter, he sounded much more confident, as if he were sure I would soften. In the past, for the sake of giving the 2 children a complete home, I had always endured, always played the role of the tolerant and magnanimous wife. I had endured and compromised far too many times. So this time, he probably thought the result would be the same again, but it never would be again. Are you willing to let me take our daughter with me? I asked with complete seriousness. Oscar laughed in anger. Do you think that's possible? She's my family's child. Yes. Exactly. It's impossible. I let out a sigh. So why force me to say it out loud? Sophia is my daughter. Before I leave, I will naturally make proper arrangements for her. Besides, I'm only leaving this family, not leaving Hong Kong. With the 2 children in the middle, my relationship with this family will never become completely irreconcilable. They have no standing to stop me from seeing my daughter. And besides, she will attend secondary school abroad too. I can accompany her while doing international business. Seeing that I still had not changed my stance, Oscar's gaze finally turned completely cold. What exactly do you want? Just because I made some mistakes outside, the kind of mistakes all men make, you're never going to forgive me? Celine, this circle is just like this. There are too many temptations. I couldn't stay untouched either. Weren't you not bothered by it before? Why are you clinging to this now? All these years, this family has always been the most important thing in my heart. Have I ever wronged you? Have I ever let you lack anything? He spoke lightly, as if years of cheating were nothing more than a trivial matter. I was truly sick of his self-righteousness. Find a time to sign it. Throwing it away is useless. The lawyer has plenty more copies. If you want as many copies as you like, I can have people print them and send them to you. Oscar, stop avoiding it. Solve this problem sooner rather than later. Chapter 24. Half a year later, Oscar and I completed the divorce process. Our marriage had long reached a point beyond saving. Dragging it out by force would do neither of us any good. Our son put pressure on him from within, and our daughter, clever beyond her years, even ran to Oscar and angrily told him to hurry up and divorce me. When he signed, Oscar said he did not understand why both children were taking my side. How could he not understand? A mother who raised her children, with every thought centered on how to pave the way for them. A father who spent every night sleeping in different women's beds. What made Oscar think the latter could prevail and win their support? After moving out of Oscar's home, I had my assistant apply for the flight route in advance and took both children with me to tour the African savannah. The private jet slid onto the runway, accelerated, and broke free from gravity. Hong Kong Island rapidly shrank outside the cabin window, growing smaller and smaller. I closed my eyes. At my ears, words Oscar had said many years ago suddenly rang out again. From the first time he took me to Victoria Peak to see the night view. Back then, the high-spirited Oscar had wrapped an arm around my shoulders, grinning openly. Celine, from now on, you'll never be alone again. Look, among all these countless lights, one of them is our home. Countless lights, not a single one of them is ours anymore. Epilogue. In the year my eldest son turned 25, he officially took over the family business. Oscar was the one who voluntarily handed over power. In the 7th year after divorcing me, His stomach problems grew increasingly severe. He often suffered gastric bleeding, and he could no longer keep up his playboy lifestyle, so he obediently moved into a sanatorium. In the span of 3 years, Lucas's achievements far surpassed everything his father had accomplished over the previous 30 years, and people often praised him for having the same style I had in my youth. Looking at my son, who had loved studying since childhood and, once grown, loved working just as much, I could not help but worry about his marriage prospects. After arranging blind dates with no results, I asked that old charlatan master from back then to cast a fortune for him. In recent years, the master had become more and more accurate at fortune-telling and face-reading, and had become quite famous in our circle. I only managed to cut in line because of our old acquaintance. After looking at my son's photo, he clicked his tongue in amazement. That shouldn't be. Your son is even more handsome than his father was when he was young. How could he possibly not have a girlfriend? Oh, I see now. A good romantic match takes time to unfold slowly. Better early than badly timed. At the latest, he'll definitely get married by 30. But, the master changed his tone. The romantic match is a good one, but it's a bit complicated. Looking at this boy, he'll definitely get divorced at 36. The master wore his usual mystifying expression, and listening to him, I was half convinced and half doubtful. At first, I felt a little worried, but then I thought again. Forget it. Children and grandchildren will have their own blessings. Who can say for certain what the future will bring? Looking back on my life, I am very satisfied with myself. From an orphaned girl, to a top student at a prestigious university, to the founder of multiple listed companies. Every step I took counted. As for the road my children will walk in the future, they will have to explore it on their own.